Point 6, Mathematics of Finance. All right, so we'll have interest compounded annually. We'll have interest compounded K times per year. We'll also have present value and future value problems as well, which present value and future value are the hardest ones, not because of the formula, but because of typing it in your calculator. Okay? People tend to miss those problems because they don't type things in correctly and use enough parentheses when they type stuff in. So, we'll talk about that when we get to those in a little bit, but that'll be how we end up today. So, first thing we're doing is finding the amount A accumulated after investing a principal P for T years at an interest rate R compounded annually. So, as a refresher, our formula for compounded annually is A equals P times 1 plus R raised to the N, or some books will use T instead. Since they're using T for these problems, I'm going to switch this to a T, but your notes may have said N. Just know that it's the same thing, just a placeholder. All right, so problem 2 says P equals $3,200. R is 8%, and T is 4. So that's for how many years that it's being compounded. So the rate, anytime they give it to us as a percent, we need to change it to a decimal. So this would be 0.08. And then we simply take and we plug the stuff in that they give us to this problem. And we're finding A, which is the amount that they have after all of this has occurred. So A equals 3,200 times 1 plus 0.08 raised to the 4th. And then at this point, you just type it in your calculator. So this is a pretty big calculator section overall. Also, when you're writing it, unless it's just asking you to like write the formula, you can go ahead and write this as 1.08 if you would prefer, like when you do that. But you don't have to like show that, because I just know that at this point you're plugging it in your calculator. And the other thing I'm going to say is keep in mind that this is money. So how many decimal places do you think we should have? 2. I have some people that try to give me multiple or just one, and I'm like, it's money. Always has to be 2.
4,353 and 56 cents.
Yep. Oh, I don't know why I just wrote a 6. 56. There we go. $4,353.56. All right, for P equals $15,500. R is 9.5%, and T is equal to 12. So we've got a higher rate this time and a lot more years, plus a much larger initial starting amount. So what is R as a decimal? 0.095. So then A equals 15,500 times, I'm just going to write it as 1.095. If you want to write 1 plus 0.095, you can, and then raised to the 12th. Then you can tell me what we get when you type that in. $46,057.58. All right, the next one, say you just do like a couple of each type of problem, because then they ultimately go into word problems, but like I said, we're not going to do those today. 6, so actually let me write the formula first like I did before. So these ones say find the amount A accumulated after investing a principal P for T years at an interest rate R compounded K times per year. So this one is using the formula A equals P times 1 plus R over K raised to the KT. So number 6, P equals $3,500. R is 5%. T is 10 and K is 4. So as far as like when K is 4, that's how many times it's compounded per year. When we get into word problems, it will say something like compounded quarterly, because that would imply 4 times a year. So with this one, if you want to go ahead and multiply or like do like the R over K like on the side, you can. I usually just go ahead and type it in. So R would be 0.05. So then A equals 3,500 times 1 plus 0.05 over 4 raised to the 4 times 10. Now, you need to be really careful when you type this in. If you don't go ahead and find this number before you do it. So what I would do is use the fact that it can type in a fraction for you so that you can type in the whole thing. So if you do, remember alpha, whoops, I hit the wrong button. Nope, that's the wrong button. Alpha y equals allows you to type in a fraction. If you don't have that option to do that, or you don't want to do it that way, you need to make sure you put parentheses around the 0.05 divided by 4, because otherwise it's going to be like 1 plus 0.05, then it's going to take that number and divide by 4. So you need to make sure you put parentheses around it if you're not going to do it this way. And then raise it to 4 times 10 is 40 to get your answer of $5,752.67. So the other way would have been 1 plus 0.05 divided by, whoops, that's multiply, divided by 4, and then raised to the 40, and you'll get the same thing. So just be careful if you type it in or type it in piece by piece to do that. Either way is fine, but just want to caution you about that. Any questions about that, typing it in or anything? All right, number 8. P equals $25,300. R is 4.5%. T is 25. And K is 12. So when we get to the word problems, if it's K is 12, it will say something like compounded monthly, okay, which implies 12 times per year. So A equals 25,300 times 1 plus 0.045 over 12 raised to the 12 times 25. So I'm going to let y'all type that one in to make sure that you're getting the correct answers that way. Did everyone get that? Or still in progress potentially? All right, so we've had compounded continually, or sorry, not. That's what we're about to do. We've had compounded annually, compounded k times per year. We're about to do compounded continually, which means it's constantly, like getting interest on it, or however you want to think about it. So these problems, we're going to be using the formula A equals PE to the RT. So these say find the amount A accumulated after investing a principal P for T years at interest rate R compounded continuously. So number 10, we have P equals $3,350. R is 6.2% and T is 8. So I have A equals 3,350, then E, so that's like the number E, raised to the 0.062 times 8. So just set it up and then tell me what we get. You say 17 cents? Okay. I heard the set like 17, and so I like wrote the 7, and I was like, wait, I think she said 17. All right. Are we okay on those ones? Okay. I'm going to jump into future value and present value because those tend to be the ones that we have the most issues with. Yes, the formula itself is more complicated. However, the problem typically comes because of typing it into the calculator. So, the future value formula is R times 1 plus I raised to the n minus 1 over I. So one of the huge things that I see people have problems with is they'll just put this R on top and start multiplying it by what's on top. But R has to get multiplied by the whole thing, okay? The thing I is equal to, I is not like the number I that we would normally have, like where it's, square root of negative 1. I is equal to R over K. And then N is T times K. So a lot of times I will find these two numbers first and then plug them in instead of like having all these little extra things happening in the problem, but it's up to you how you want to do it. So number 14, we've got R equals $300. Little r, I guess I should just specify capital R is $300. Little r is 6%. T is 12 and K is 4. So I pretty much always find I and N first before I do anything else. So I equals R over K, so that's going to be 0.06 over 4. And what do I get when I divide those things? 0.015. And then N is equal to 12 times 4, which is 48. So I'm going to use these numbers when I plug into my formula up here. All right, so I've got future value is equal to 300 times 1 plus 0.015 raised to the 48 minus 1 over 0.015. All right, so as far as typing this in, if you are going, or if your calculator does not have the ability to do the fraction, then I would say you need to work piece by piece when you do this, as far as doing like this 1.015 raised to the 48. Get an answer. Subtract 1. Divide by 0.015. Then multiply by 300. Since my calculator does the fraction, I'm going to type this entire thing in, but I'm just going to be really careful with my parentheses as I do stuff. So, I'm going to do 300 times, I'm going to put a parentheses here so that it knows that 300 is getting multiplied by the whole thing, not just this one little piece on the top. Alpha y equals for my fraction. I'm going to go ahead and make this 1.015 raised to the 48 minus 1. So if you're doing 1 plus 0.015 instead of just writing it as 1.015 when you are typing it in that way, make sure you put parentheses there. And then over 0.015. And so we get a future value of $20,000 or $20,869.57. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is Maya, you did the 0.015. Was that just flat out 0.015 or was it farther out than that?
0.
Okay. So if it's something that goes farther out than that and you round the number, sometimes your answer is going to be off by a little bit. That's okay. Okay. I'm looking for your setup to be right and that you're like in the right range of your answer. So if your answer isn't exactly that, when we get to some that aren't going to come out to be perfectly like 0.015, just because your calculator will hold that value if you type it in the other way. Just know that you might be off a little bit by what the book has, but don't be concerned if you're off by like $5 or $10, because that can really make a difference by that little bit of a decimal. All right. Did everyone get that when they typed that in? No issues there. Okay. 16. R equals $610. Little r is 6.5%. T equals 25 and K equals 12. All right, so I first, which is R over K. So 0.065 divided by 12. What do I get when I do that?
Do you round to 2 decimal places?
How far out does this go?
To 3, but it's a 5.
I would just, if it's only like 3 or 4 decimal places, I would just keep all of them.
I mean, it goes out pretty far, like 0.00541, and like a bunch of 6s.
Okay, let's just say let's do 3 decimal places then. If it doesn't give you, like now, if the number goes out to 4 decimal places and it stops, like if it was like 0.0125, then just keep all of it. But if it's going out where it's something that keeps going kind of like forever, let's just go to 3 decimal places, and that way everyone's answers will be consistent. Okay, so what is this at 3 decimal places? What is this round to, Tristan? I forgot what number you said already.
0.005.
0.005. Okay. And then N is T times K, so 25 times 12. What was that, 300? Alright, so plugging it in, we get 610 times 1 plus 0.005 raised to the 300 minus 1 over 0.005.
Yep, you did it. Do not.
I got it. 4, 2, 2, 7, 2, 6, 1, 1, 2. Or not 1, 2, 3, 2.
So $422,726.32. Did everyone get that? Or at least close to that. Now, just for you to see where my calculator went. If instead I did not find I and N beforehand, well, N's not going to make a difference, but I beforehand. I just want to show you what's going to happen. Okay. So if I did this, so I'd have 610 times alpha y equals, I put in my fraction. I have 1 plus, I'm going to do another fraction here. So 1 plus 0.065 over 12 raised to the 300 minus 1 over fraction 0.065 over 12. Notice that my answer comes out to be literally even a couple $1,000 difference, right? Like, kind of drastically. That can happen if you're using the other decimal numbers. So that's why I'm saying I'm going to look at your process, and then I'm going to make sure that your numbers make sense when you type them in. Okay? So just know that your answer may be different than the back of the book. If you get something like that, you can come see me. I would say just find I and N beforehand. That's what I typically do. Makes life way easier, and then you don't have to worry about it. But I just wanted you to see that if you type it in the other way, you will get a different answer. So.
Will you count, like,
What do you mean?
both?
Yeah. Because it's rounded versus unrounded answer. That's why I'm saying, like, I need to see that, like, what you plugged in. So if you are going to plug it in as I just did on the calculator, don't write 1 plus 0.005 and then type it in the other way. Like, if you're going to do it where you're typing in all the little fractions instead, then write it this way instead of writing it as a decimal. So that I know what you typed in. So if I went back and typed it in my calculator, I can get the same answer, basically. But normally, as long as you're in the right range, I don't go back and check that closely, because that would be a lot if everyone did it a little bit differently. But that's why I also said let's just consistently round to 3 decimal places for I if you're going to do it that way, so that way everyone has the same answer. All right, so that was future value. The last thing is present value, which isn't too drastically different other than the setup of the problem. So present value, we have R times, and this is the same thing where it is like in front being multiplied by the whole thing. 1 minus, in parentheses, 1 plus I raised to the negative n over okay, it's the same. Did I use the right numbers when I just plugged that in? Yeah, I did. Okay. Over I. Okay, so this problem says, and I and N are the same thing as they were in the previous problem, so I'm not going to rewrite those. So number 18, Little r is 6.5%. Big R is $1,856.82. T is 30. And then in the initial question, it said, find the present value of a loan with an annual interest rate R, periodic payments R, for term of T years with payments made and interest charged 12 times per year. So they didn't have it down in this actual problem statement, but in the question, they tell us that K would be 12. So I is equal to 0.065 out of 12. So I was confused because that was the same as last one, so I thought I was looking at the wrong thing. So we already know this is 0.005. And this is going to do the same thing. If you plug in the fraction versus the rounded decimal, you're going to end up with a different final answer, but it should still be, well, I'm going to say close, more or less. But and then n is equal to 30 times 12. Which is what, 360. So present value equals 1,856.82 times, on top, 1 minus in parentheses, I'm going to go ahead and write this as 1.005 raised to the, notice it's negative n, so this is going to be negative 360 over 0.005. So typing this one in, again, you need to be careful with the way you type it in, work piece by piece. And especially be careful here. You may want to do like a double parentheses if you're typing this in without the fraction bars. So 1 minus, do parentheses, then do another one, 1.005 raised to the negative 360, and then close it so that it makes sure that it gets exactly what you're trying to get it to give you the value of. Do we have an answer?
I got 309,702 and 1 cent.
Everyone get that? Something close to that. All right. Any questions on any of this? All right. So like I said, we're going to go back after Thanksgiving break and do the word problems. We're stopping here as far as what will be on your quiz on Tuesday. So your problems are... how do I want to do this? 3, 7, 11, 13, 15, and wait, 17. If you want to go back as optional extra, just for practice, 1, 5, and 9 would be extra practice of the first 3 types, but I think that's pretty much good. A lot of times what I do on the test and typically on the quiz is I will let you write the formulas and bring them to me to check them so that you make sure that you're using the right formula, because I don't want you to like just get a problem wrong because you have the formula wrong, but you have to at least like attempt writing the formula down for me to give it to you. be like relatively close. Also, I'm gonna give you your quiz